There's a certain kind of magic with some games that we play. Their very names inspire wonder and creativity and fill us with those warm feelings of joy and comfort. The kind of games that make us think differently when playing them and hold a special place in our hearts long after we stop. There are some games that capture a moment of your life. They act as your outlet for the experiences and emotions you're having, and may even project some of their own back onto you. These games are incredibly rare, and we may not even realise their effect on us at the time, but when we see their names or hear their music, the emotions they made us feel resurface, and we are brought back to that moment of our life they captured so long ago. There are very few titles able to do this to me, and the older I've gotten, the feelings that they're able to evoke have become more subtle and understated. But there's still at least one game that transports me back to the child I was the first time I played it. LittleBigPlanet was a 2.5D puzzle platformer exclusive to the PlayStation 3, and although at first glance it may appear like any other game from the platforming genre, to those of us who were lucky enough to play LittleBigPlanet, it's clear it was so much more than that. From its opening monologue narrated by the wonderful Stephen Fry, to its overflowing vats of creativity and player-designed content, LittleBigPlanet was unlike anything that had come before it. Even how it treated the player was different to other games, talking to them gently and on a personal level. There felt like a degree of respect that the game offered its users, knowing they could potentially use the game as a source of creativity and design. LittleBigPlanet felt like a blank canvas, and the player its artist, both working in conjunction to produce a unique and beautiful experience. Its strong focus on utilising player imagination through its extensive level editor, and its incorporation of a connected online community, made it one of the first games to be built around user-generated content. There had been plenty of games that had level editors before LittleBigPlanet, and there were even communities online to share player-made creations of many games. But LittleBigPlanet seemed to achieve a ubiquitous vision that was unlike anything the game industry had seen before. All of this was on top of the already brilliant story mode that came with the game, which took players to levels inspired by locations all around the globe, with quirky and charismatic characters and an enthralling soundtrack to accompany them along their journey. Even the main hub area of the game, known as the player's pod, was a cardboard capsule they could call home whilst playing. Ready for customization with stickers and decorations, the pod was a blank canvas primed for the player to express their individuality, and when they were ready, the virtual embodiment of a DualShock 3 controller awaited their interaction to explore the world they were now a part of. I haven't even mentioned the star of the show, Mr. Imagination himself. When players first started up LittleBigPlanet, they would be greeted with the entrance of a knitted ragdoll introduced to us as Sackboy. Despite appearing rather bland on his first introduction, this would quickly change as the player began their journey through the game's story. As the player progresses and completes levels, they would come across vast piles of collectibles known as bubbles, which would unlock different items to customize Sackboy's appearance. Players could chop and change at any time, mixing outfits, hairstyles, accessories and stickers to create the most unique avatar for them to play with. The developers also made great use of the technology available in the player's controller. The new 6-axis motion controls in the DualShock 3 meant players could move the controller in any direction to control Sackboy's head. Maybe a slight gimmick on the surface, but this combined with the directional pad's ability to alter the character's emotions added so much charisma and personality to Sackboy, and the game as a whole. LittleBigPlanet was also one of the first major games to incorporate a sort of skin system, adding famous characters from popular intellectual properties to use in the player's customization of their Sackboy. This was pretty rare for the time, and although many of the skins required additional payment, they felt like a really cool feature to further the player's customization of their character. The bubbles that contained the clothing and accessories for Sackboy also contained the various props, stickers, tools and scenery from the levels of the story in the game. As players collected these bubbles, the items inside would become unlocked in the level editor ready for the player to use when they wanted to create something. This level editor was a revolutionary feature of LittleBigPlanet, and in many ways was the key to its success beyond its curated content. The game was already fantastic in its own right, bursting with creativity and imagination developed by the studio's hard-working team, but with an editor for the players, suddenly the limitations of what the game could be were unbounded. As I said earlier, level editors had existed long before LittleBigPlanet came out, but they were often only available in PC games and in many cases required technical know-how to use them. The level editor in LittleBigPlanet was incredibly user-friendly, with colourful and approachable user interfaces, and the opportunity to create complex and intricate levels all with a controller. Now I'm sure many of you watching may have tried your hand at creating your own level, which whilst easier than many other experiences, was still a very time-consuming and intensive task. However, when browsing the levels available through the online community, it was obvious how many talented and imaginative individuals were creating for players around the world. From basic story maps to duplicates of entire games, users constantly pushed the boundaries of what was thought to be possible with the tools available to them. There were even design trends that flowed through the community, with iterations of game modes or mechanics that were then repeated and improved upon. Many of these maps could also be played with others online, whether it be in competitive races and challenges, or cooperative puzzles that required teamwork to get through. It seemed as though LittleBigPlanet was an endless pool of creativity, primed for expression and sharing amongst others. The game really felt like a cohesive vision by the entire studio behind it, encouraging players to try new things and design new experiences. Everyone seemed to be on the same wavelength when making the game, with fantastic and approachable art direction, unique physics-based controls, an iconic soundtrack, and an aura of excitement around making things and facilitating players' imagination. There really seemed to be nowhere left to go but up for LittleBigPlanet, and for once, this was true. After winning a plethora of awards and accolades for their first entry in the series, and developing an installment for the PSP, MediaMolecule was tasked with creating a direct sequel in LittleBigPlanet 2. The biggest challenge that faced them was creating a new game that built upon what they already had, without fracturing the community between two games and making what came before obsolete. This meant that the team's priority was to create a sequel that could incorporate the nearly 3 million user-created levels so they would be playable in the new game. As well as keeping the old, the studio wanted to push the game further and explore even more ways to facilitate user-generated content. They added new types of levels to create, with races, puzzles and role-playing games all being added. They incorporated new animation options, allowing users to create cutscenes for their levels and manipulate elements like the camera and sound effects. The game even came with a music sequencer where players could make original tracks to go along with their levels, and they added the ability to link multiple levels together for extended experiences. A new tool to assist in gameplay creation known as the Controlinator was also introduced, which allowed for more dynamic and exact actions, which greatly enhanced the gameplay experience for many players. Where the first game had laid the foundation for player creation, the second had built an entire workshop of design and creativity for players, and was continuously supported by the studio, adding new features regularly and fixing any bugs or errors players were having. The tools for creation were so good that a small team of community members were asked to make a semi-official level pack that could match the story levels included in the game. I think this really speaks to the culture of MediaMolecule and its community for being able to trust users with making something so big. Like the first game, there seemed to be a real belief in the players that they could make truly brilliant things in the game, and push the limitations of LittleBigPlanet even further. LittleBigPlanet 2 had exceeded the first in almost every way, with another great story, iconic soundtrack, and brilliant level editor, and this was backed up with winning another line of awards and receiving endless critical acclaim. The game was even being looked at for educational applications, where students and teachers in schools could potentially complete lessons and curriculum through levels made in the game. Although this was ultimately unrealised, it added a level of legitimacy to the franchise for its creative and pedagogical importance to the people who played it. People who were unfamiliar with games or normally overlooked them were suddenly paying attention to the LittleBigPlanet series and what it was trying to do. With the success of the first and second games being fully cemented, it seemed as though MediaMolecule would be tasked with creating the next installment in the franchise. But after having spent the majority of the company's lifespan on the previous games, the studio was now looking for new projects which would eventually be revealed as Tearaway for the PS Vita and Dreams for the PS4. Their focus taken off their debut title, development for LittleBigPlanet was passed to Sumo Digital along with a number of other studios for assistance. With the release of the PlayStation 4, there was a notable lack of presence of Sackboy on the new console, and in 2014, LittleBigPlanet 3 was officially announced to the world. Later that year, the game released with versions available on both the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. Despite losing its original creator, the game did still manage to hold on to many of its core beliefs and ideas. The user-generated content was still central to the game, and all of the levels from the first two games were again carried over to the new entry. New playable characters were also introduced to accompany Sackboy on his adventures, each complete with their own special ability. Oddsock was a four-legged dog-like character who could run faster than Sackboy. Swoop was a bird-like character with the ability to fly around levels and pick up objects, and Toggle could switch between various sizes to traverse areas and complete puzzles. Although LittleBigPlanet 3 was decently received upon its initial release, there was a feeling of disappointment and lack of innovation overall around the game. While some new features and ideas had been incorporated well into its design, many of the new mechanics and items failed to capture the same magic that the first two games had. This, mixed with the game's technical issues and game-breaking bugs, left a sour taste in many fans' mouths. Whilst it was critically praised by some, it ultimately felt like a downturn for the series after the highs it had reached before. This was a really difficult thing to see after being a fan of the games for so long, and growing up with them. It felt easy to blame Sumo Digital for many of the game's issues after taking over from MediaMolecule, but looking back now I can see how difficult of a task it was to take over from the studio that started the series and perfected so many things about it. I actually really liked some of the things they tried to do with the game, even if it did compromise on the overall end product. It felt more like another platformer with some level builder mechanics built in, rather than a creative experience that inspired and encouraged players to dip into their imagination. There is of course nothing wrong with this, but I think the studio ultimately failed to capture the true essence of what a LittleBigPlanet game should really be. To make matters worse, just last year the online community for all LittleBigPlanet games was shut down after a group of hackers attacked the servers and compromised their security. The user-created levels and content became unavailable on every version and entry of the game, and although they were recovered for the PS4 version of LittleBigPlanet 3, losing the online component of every other installment of the franchise felt like a huge blow to the community and fanbase. However, in 2020, after nearly 6 years of silence on the franchise, it was announced that Sumo Digital would get another chance at creating in the LittleBigPlanet universe with the PS5 launch title Sackboy: A Big Adventure. This was a really great and fun take on a fully 3D platformer, and I felt they incorporated many of the characteristics of LittleBigPlanet into the game in really unique and interesting ways. I also felt they really made use of the new technology available in the DualSense controller to build a really immersive and engaging experience for players. Obviously the game serves as more of a spin-off rather than a mainline entry, but thanks to its positive reception and commercial success, it seems interesting the LittleBigPlanet franchise has been renewed by modern audiences. Whilst nothing has been announced yet, it does feel as though there is a space for a game like LittleBigPlanet once again on newer hardware. This, matched with MediaMolecule's most recent release of Dreams in 2020, may mean that games created around user-generated content could be making a return, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. There are of course games outside of the series completely that are looking to follow in its footsteps. Earlier this year, a reveal trailer for Restitched was released on YouTube, which has been proclaimed by many fans as a spiritual successor to LittleBigPlanet. Focusing strongly on user-created content, the game is very similar to the first two games of the series, even adopting a similar stitched and paper-like aesthetic. Though the game is still some time away, it looks as if fans can be hopeful that the spirit of MediaMolecule's franchise lives on in Restitched, and that the feelings of imagination and creativity can be captured once again. LittleBigPlanet was a key moment in my gaming journey. It showed me the power of imagination in players' hands, and how a studio with dreams of making something to inspire people could really achieve their goal. I know to some people LittleBigPlanet was a game much like any other with the added bonus of some user-created content, but for so many of us, LittleBigPlanet represents something bigger than how it appeared. It may have been your first introduction into making and designing levels, or your first experience of connecting with people online and sharing in their creations, but I think we can all agree that LittleBigPlanet was special. Its charm, character, wit, individuality, music, creativity and originality all set it apart from anything that came before it or since, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank anyone who helped to make it something so incredible. From the developers at MediaMolecule and Sumo Digital, and all the other studios that helped, to the players and fans who created levels and made the game what it was, thank you for making LittleBigPlanet so magical. The lessons and effects of this game are still with me to this day, and though some of it may be lost to time, the series will forever hold a special place in my heart. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, comment down below to join in on the conversation around LittleBigPlanet, and subscribe to see future videos from the channel.